Good afternoon, everyone. If you want to find a seat, I'm sure we will have some more who are going to be joining us today. It is great to have you here today. If this is your first time in the alongside of families who have terminally ill kids. And one of the toughest kind of callings in life, and tenderly and beautifully love those families. And they create these events with different sports teams or other things for them to be a part of, and it's just an amazing deal. And so wanted to make sure you were aware of that. A few weeks ago, we had a speaker here, Steve Johnson, who spoke about all these different prisons, and he is going to be filming in about 10 days or so in some prisons. And if you want an opportunity to be an actor and get to go behind bars, he's still looking for a few people to be part of that video. It is an amazing, amazing deal. I think if this will be your IMDb cred or whatever, you get the opportunity to be acting in something that is going to be used all over the place. But one of the things he talked about, and a lot of you asked me about afterwards, was volunteering, and just how can I volunteer amongst those who are in a really needy spot. And on Monday, we have a really unique opportunity. So in this room, Monday at 4 p.m., we're going to have Joel Knorr with us. That's not a lunch and learn. It's not been advertised. Joel is the principal of Forest Hills Elementary School here in Eden Prairie. And he is looking for some volunteers for 3 months. So for the months of April, May, and June, who would be willing to give at least 2 days a month to either read to kids in classrooms, help with the library, work with art, be a guest speaker to help at lunch or playground. Forest Hills is an unusual school in Eden Prairie. It's actually our lowest performing elementary school, and so Joel went over there to help turn that around. It's a school that has just a ton of diversity, and with that, a lot of kids who don't even speak English. And so the teachers have some challenges there just to try to bring everybody up to speed. And so they're just looking for some helpers. They have this thing called the Senior Volunteer Program that you don't have to be a senior to volunteer for. But if you are a senior, Joel, before he came to Eden Prairie, lived in the Phoenix area and helped turn around one of the schools there. And he said, we did it through grandmas and grandpas who would come and volunteer in the classroom and just read to kids. And he said, it doesn't matter if they're grandma or grandpa. He says, that's our key demographic because there's a little bit more availability. But if you've got some availability and you want to know more about that, after the Lunch and Learn today, I'd love to talk with you about that. It's an initiative that I'm going to be heading up on behalf of Wooddale, working with the schools, and I would love to just blow them away this Monday with way more people than they could ever imagine. So just kind of FYI. You didn't come to hear about all that, though. Today you came for our topic, which is all about parenting in kind of the age of anxiety. You know, one of the #1 best-selling books right now is a book called The Anxious Generation. Jonathan Haidt wrote that. If you haven't picked it up, highly recommend picking that book up because it really describes what so many parents and educators and those who have the opportunity to work with kids, marriage, family therapists, others would say that it is a word that describes this generation. We know that coming out of COVID, there was just kind of a fundamental shift during that time, and so many of these kids. Some of the kids, remember that book, Everything I Needed to Learn, I Learned in Kindergarten? A lot of our kids didn't even have that opportunity. Well, our speaker today is an amazing, amazing woman. Elisabeth Emmerich is somebody who came highly recommended to me by our women's ministry because she has spoken in there on multiple occasions. She's a licensed therapist. She's a registered play therapist. She is a wife and a mom and a business owner. She owns Creekside Counseling here in Eden Prairie, and she's worked in the mental health field for over a decade. Elisabeth also has a podcast. So if you're a podcast listener, that is all I listen to anymore, our podcast. Her podcast, Experience Motherhood, offers helps to moms as they live out their unique motherhood journey. She loves to come alongside moms and kids to support them in discovering that they are wonderfully and uniquely created, something that we believe here at Wooddale Church about every person. And outside of her business, she loves walking the family dog and hanging out with her husband and her boys and just being outside. Would you welcome Elisabeth as she comes to speak with us today?
All right, hello. Okay, I was warned about the mic, so just let me know if you can't hear me. Okay, I also will just put a plug for that Anxious Generation book. I'm going to talk about it in my resources. By far, one of my most favorite books in 2024, and I kind of tell everyone about this book, so I would agree, put it on your Amazon wish list and purchase it. So, okay, we're going to go through an anxious culture topic today. So I just want to have you check in with your body for a minute and just notice how you're feeling, okay? And throughout it, we're going to kind of do the same thing because I totally believe that when we are focused on ourselves and our own regulation, that is going to impact others around us, including our kids or the kids in your family or network. So, just a real quick introduction. Brian already kind of introduced me a little bit, but I've been married to my husband for 12 years. I am a mom of 3 boys, almost 11 in a couple weeks, 8 and 6. And then, yes, I have a private practice here in Eden Prairie, just like across the street from Wooddale here. And I've been there for about 4 years and have been in the field for over 10 or so. I have to do the math. And I also have experienced motherhood, also just a new business endeavor that I really wanted to reach more women, in particular moms who maybe aren't ready to go to therapy or just need some support but don't need a therapist. So that's just another option that I went through. Okay, so today we are going to talk about a couple different topics. What anxiety is, how it affects parenting, how anxiety shows up in our kids, and how it also manifests in parents and caregivers. So whether you have your own children, grandparents, you're a nanny, just you're around children, hopefully this will be really impactful for you. And I also want to give some biblical encouragement for just navigating anxiety, because the Bible talks a lot about it. And then also, of course, the best part, and probably why you're here, for practical ways to manage anxiety for yourself and your kids. So we're going to cover a lot in a short amount of time, and then there'll be time for some questions and answers at the end. So anxiety is very prevalent. These stats were pulled from previous, before COVID. So just imagine that these stats are probably much, much higher. But an estimated 31% of U.S. adults experience an anxiety disorder at some point in their lives. A lot of children, 9.4%, that is a high number. Again, this was before COVID. I don't think the studies have fully done the new information out there, so I don't know what the stat is, but we can all imagine that it's much higher. And then same with moms. I put this one in there too because, like I said, I do really love speaking to women in particular, but I know dads also have anxiety, so I just want you to know that I see you, grandparents. Anxiety is a real thing, and so I just want to acknowledge that. So what actually is anxiety? There's two different ways to kind of conceptualize anxiety. Obviously, there's the regular, definition. And then the DSM is what we use in the mental health world to really give a diagnosis. These are some symptoms. Doesn't mean that if you have a couple of these that you have it or you don't. I'm not a huge diagnose label person, but if you wanted to know what it would require an actual diagnosis, these are some of the symptoms that we look for: restlessness, being easily fatigued, irritability, muscle tension, sleep disturbance, and I can imagine that we probably all have some of these, even maybe right now. So just, again, acknowledging that that is real, that we all have anxiety. So I like to kind of nerd out a little bit here and just make sure that we understand how the brain works a little bit. I'm not going to lie, it's going to be a little hard with the mic to do this, so I will do my best. But so to understand the brain, if you want to humor me and hold up your own hand, if we start at the wrist area, this is the basic part that develops in the womb, the very beginning. It's the brain stem. Sometimes it's called the reptilian brain. This is where survival instincts come out. You are just surviving. Basic. Think of this sweet little baby over here. Right? Just trying to, sorry to point you out, but just think of that newborn baby. They're not thinking, they're not talking, they're not really doing anything, they're just trying to survive. So that's what's forming first. If we come up here into your middle of your hand, if you put your thumb across, this part is kind of right behind your eyes. But this part of the brain has some really important parts, including the hippocampus, which has our memories and has our storage there, has the amygdala. The amygdala is our kind of alarm system, emotional center. That's where you feel anger, sadness, anxiety, all the things are there, okay? If you fold your fingers over, this is representing this prefrontal cortex in your frontal lobe. This is where executive functioning comes. It's how you think, it's how you plan. And if you think of your fingernails, that's kind of where you develop feelings and empathy for others. These things all develop throughout childhood, okay? And I think they say 26 is the full adult brain now. So these are developing. And so just keep that in mind as we talk about kids and anxiety and just where they are at developmentally. But if you think of your hand as your brain, if you guys have heard of that phrase, flipped your lid before, have you guys heard of this? Flip your lid? Okay. It's kind of a common phrase. But if you think of someone who flips their lid, you're thinking of someone who's really anxious, really angry, just goes 0 to 10 all of a sudden. What's happening is they're flipping their lid. That means their prefrontal cortex is going offline. You're not thinking anymore. You are coming back into this alarm system part where you're feeling anxious, you're angry, you're sad, all those really intense emotions, and you enter back into your reptilian brain. and you have to survive. You do the fight, flight, freeze, which many of us have heard of. We'll talk a little bit more about that today. But when you hear that phrase, flip your lid, that's what it means. It means that you are not able to make logical decisions and what to do in that situation. So I always like to think of the 3-year-old who's maybe wants goldfish and not the other snack that's offered and just flips out, right? They're not logically thinking, well, that other snack is also pretty good, or maybe I could have goldfish later. They just aren't capable of doing that. But it's not only children, it's also adults. We do that too, right? We can flip and we're not thinking, we're just trying to survive. And so that's what it means. That's my little nerdy brain moment, so now you know, okay? Okay, so like I said, we're gonna check in with ourselves right now. And this is a really intense graphic, and I recently found it and I loved it. And I'm not gonna go into everything because that's too much information for a lunch and learn. But I just want to give you an idea of what's going on in our bodies. So just take a minute right now. If you feel comfortable, you can close your eyes. You could look down at the floor, but just check in with your body. Where are you at? Notice your toes, your feet. Are they touching the ground? Are they tight? Are they tense? And kind of just work up in your body and just notice how you're feeling. Don't judge it. Maybe you're still hungry. That's why you were here for lunch. Maybe you're exhausted because you had a late night last night. Maybe you're really stressed out because you have a ton of projects, a ton of things to do. And just notice your body. And what I love about this graphic in particular, it really talks about our vagus nerve, and everyone has one, and it's the part that's connected to our nervous system. So we all have this special zone that's called the ventral vagal. Big words, just means that really good sweet spot that you just feel good. You're confident, you're not worried, you're not angry, you're just loving life. That's your ventral. But as we get out of our ventral vagal, we go into something called sympathetic. That's where we feel really anxious. We feel a lot of intense emotions. Rage, irritation, worry, all of those things. Fight and flight, we're not going to talk about that today, but they're just different ways that we respond when we're in sympathetic. And then after sympathetic, we also can go into dorsal vagal. This is when we feel really sad. We're just disassociating, we're checked out, we're just not really present. And as you can see, there's a curve, and what I liked about the curve is that we never fully get stuck in any of these forever, but it can happen at times where we really just feel like we're living there all the time. And we don't not want to experience sympathetic. We want to have emotions. We want to have all of those things. So the idea is that we are able to recognize where we want to be and be able to come in and out of all of these, kind of like a wave, okay? And so just keep that in mind even today as we're talking about anxiety, is just, again, when you check in with yourself, you're just noticing, where am I at today? Where am I as I showed up today for this lunch and learn? All right, so let's dive into anxiety in children. So I'm going to talk mostly about younger kids. There certainly could be another whole talk on teenage stuff, but we're just going to talk about younger children for now. Physical signs that kids might be really anxious. They have stomach aches a lot. They complain that their stomach's upset. They have headaches. Maybe they can't fall asleep. Maybe they wake up a lot. They might be really irritable. Maybe they are just angry all the time. This one's really big because I think sometimes we as parents don't connect that, but when kids are really angry, sometimes it's an anxiety. They're fearful of something. They're scared of something, worried. They don't know how to express it. And kids are known for telling us how they feel and communicating through behaviors. They're not gonna, I always tell kids when they come into, my therapy sessions, I don't expect them to sit there and just tell me all, hey, I had a really rough day at school, Jimmy pushed me down and then I got up. They're not gonna process verbally in that way. They're gonna tell you by, showing you. Maybe they're wanting to leave school. Maybe they have those stomach aches. They don't, whatever it is. just those behavioral signs are going to be really big to just pay attention to. Anxiety in parents or grandparents or however you are around children. How does it show up? Honestly, kind of similarly. There's so many stressors in our world today. I mean, so many. Like, we can just look at even our own country, right? But there's more than that. If you're a parent or a grandparent or a nanny, you know, there are schedules, there's household, there's your own work outside the home, there's activities. Kids get sick. What do? Kids are starting something new. Sign up for activities. Those spring sign-ups are insanely crazy. Just kids struggling with something. There's always stuff going on. There's just so many stressors, right? And so how do we maybe show up as anxious parents and caregivers? We might lose our temper. We might be really irritable. We might have somatic symptoms. So somatic symptoms too, maybe you're getting diarrhea all the time. That is a symptom that could be related to anxiety. Maybe you're having racing thoughts. Maybe those migraines are just coming more and more frequently. So these are all signs that potentially there could be some anxiety going on. So we overanalyze a lot in adulthood, right? Just thinking about all of those, quoted right choices for our children. We just overanalyze everything. Maybe it's feeding newborns, sleep schedules. We just think of that all the time. If you're feeling constantly on edge, maybe this is how anxiety is showing up for you. You react really strongly to really small things, small challenges, and you just, again, flip your lid. Maybe you're overcommitting. Maybe you're trying to meet everyone else's needs before your own, and you just don't have those good boundaries. Maybe it's just always thinking of the next thing. One of my things about checking in with yourself and being in your body, right? It's bringing us back to right now, this moment, 12:22 on Thursday, March 20th, right? It's bringing us back here, not thinking about what do you need to do here right when you're done. We're checking in now. How are you doing right now? So just noticing all of these things just gives you an idea that anxiety, again, is really prevalent. And when we're really anxious, that's going to affect our kids. So let's talk about that. Okay, so the mirror effect is something with neurotransmitters in our brain. And, I always love this example, and especially being here at Wooddale, you guys will all relate, hopefully, with this one. But when you're in a worship service and everyone's singing and you're swaying, you're singing, you're in worship, and everyone else happens to also be swaying, and you're all kind of doing the same movement, that's because there's a mirroring effect going on. Our nervous systems are sensing all the other nervous systems in the room, just like right now. All of our nervous systems are communicating with each other. And if I, started running around the room and going crazy, you would feel that without even seeing it. You would just sense that in your body. So even in that church example, it's our brains are picking up these cues, our nervous systems, and then we all start to kind of do similar behavior. So why is this important? Well, if we're really anxious like we just talked about, and we're running all over the place, doing all the things, maybe being really short with our family or our spouses, guess whose nervous systems pick that up? Our children's, okay? Those kids are picking that up too. And it goes the opposite way too. When our kids are really anxious, right, we feel that. We get really worried. We don't know how to handle that tantrum. So bringing this to our attention is just to make sure that we know that when we are in control of ourselves, that's really all we can control. And when we can regulate ourselves, we can help others regulate too, without telling them what to do and letting them have the opportunity to respond. So we can really encourage problem solving too, instead of just fixing everything. So what is this difference between protecting and preparing? That's such a difficult one, and I think it's so difficult for each and every kid, because every kid is so different and every parent is so different. And even as previous speakers here, it sounds like have talked about those stories from our past and our own childhood upbringings. All of that is impacting how we respond parenting our own children. So we really want to just encourage that we're not, going to go fix every problem that Billy has. We want to encourage how could he fix that? How can we help him regulate And maybe it's by modeling. If you're really stressed from the day, maybe it's oh, mommy is really stressed out. I just need to go take my deep breath. And you're like verbally communicating what you need to do to go calm down. Or maybe it's, I need to go take a mom time out in the corner just so that I can take my deep breaths and I can regulate. But you're just kind of modeling what to do when you feel anxious instead of just telling them what to do, if that makes sense. And then, of course, just trusting God with their future, our kids' futures, our futures. It's so easy to say that, but then to actually live it out and do it is a totally different thing. So just coming back to what would that mean? What does that look like in your family to trust God in this anxious culture, in this anxious season, in everything? Okay, so practical things. How do we approach kids when they are anxious? This is from Dr. Siegel's book, The Whole Brain Child. He also has a book called No Drama Discipline. Both I highly recommend. I think he really just nails it. But kind of some basic steps to kind of do when approaching kids. First of all, we have to have them feel seen. And what does that mean? It's not just with their eyes, it's this felt sense, this empathy, right? So if a child's throwing a tantrum over like a wrong colored cup or just being difficult, they might feel overwhelmed and out of control. And we don't want to just dismiss that feeling. We want to acknowledge that. So maybe it's, oh, you really wanted that blue cup. That's so frustrating. I see why you're so upset. And just validating what's happening for them without that judgment. Number 2 would just be helping them feel safe. So we're going to avoid actions and responses that frighten them or hurt them. And this one can be hard if you yourself are anxious because you're just reacting. You're not thinking in your prefrontal cortex. So if a child's afraid to go to bed alone, rather than saying, oh, you're being ridiculous, there's nothing to be afraid of, maybe we can create more of a safety by just acknowledging their feelings. It's okay to feel scared. I'll sit with you for a few minutes. Number 3 would be just to soothe them. We can help them with their difficult emotions and situations. And again, this is just helping that self-regulation. So maybe you sit with them. Maybe you just hold them, and you're working on your own breathing while you're holding them, and they can feel that and sense that. And finally, then we help them be secure. So we can help them develop this internalized sense of well-being. And again, just emphasizing that they can feel how they want to feel and that you're not scared of it. You're not scared of those big feelings. You can handle that, and even maybe verbalizing that with them, but just letting them know that you don't need to run away from that. So there's kind of 2 brains in your brain. There's a left brain and a right brain. And this is super important, I thought, to just know, because the left brain is really that logical, analytical side that is developing throughout childhood and into adulthood. But when kids are born, they are much more utilizing their right brain, which is the creative, artistic, nonverbal, emotional, imaginative. Kids are functioning more out of that. And it's not that we don't want to use feeling words. We definitely do. You want to always be communicating that, but they're not going to conceptualize it like they would if you were doing something more creative with it and explain. So artwork or playing with toys. As a registered play therapist, that's what we really believe, is that play is a child's language and the toys are their words, and that's how they're communicating all the time through play. So when a child's really emotionally flooded, like really upset, really anxious, their right brain gets activated and their logical brain isn't going to work. So same idea with that flip the lid, is you could talk to them for an hour, or you could talk to them for 1 minute and be like, oh, we can't do that, you should be doing this, da-da-da-da-da-da. They're not hearing you at all. So you're just wasting your breath. Doesn't mean that you don't go back later and talk about it when they have their lid down and they're more functioning in their own body, but logic just doesn't work. So they first need that emotional connection. So what we just went over before is that emotional connection, helping them be seen, safe, soothed, and secure. So one of the coolest things I think is about some of this gratitude research that's come out over the last couple of decades. I don't know if you Google it, I think some of the images might even come up, but they've done brain studies watching the brain that's going from anxious, and then when you start being thankful and practicing gratitude, that anxious part of your brain, that amygdala, calms down. Like they can see it on brain scans. It's so crazy. And what I think is so amazing with that, of course, as a believer, is that God knows that. He created our brain. That is exactly what the whole plan was, right? When we are thanking God, he has so many verses about anxiety and thanksgiving and practicing gratitude. I can't help but think that was on purpose because, yeah, when we're practicing gratitude and being thankful, I don't feel anxious. I really don't, if you're really being thankful and practicing that. So like I said, there's so many verses in the Bible about all of these, and these are just a couple that I pulled. But one I wanted to highlight too was just Isaiah 41, verse 10. It says, "So do not fear, for I am with you. Do not be dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you and help you. I will uphold you with my righteous right hand." And I think what's so cool about all of these verses and so many in the Bible is that God never once says, you can't feel worried, but he says, do not be worried. Do not be anxious. Being anxious and feeling anxious seem very distinct to me. And I've just found that's really interesting. And I think if we go through our lives in the world that we're in our anxious society, in our families, yeah, what does that mean? How can we feel anxious but not be anxious? And I think some of these verses just really pull to light how to not be anxious. We're going to be thankful. We're going to pray to God. We're going to trust him with our children's future. And we can just help our kids learn that it's okay to have emotions. God made them, but they're not in charge of us, right? And then one other story, too, I also wanted to share was just Mary of Bethany. I'm not going to read it all, but you can kind of skim it as I talk. But sometimes I wonder in this story, she was so distracted with all of these things she wanted to do. And I just picture parents and grandparents sometimes, we're, like I said, running around doing all of these things, activities, work, cleaning the house, yard projects, whatever it is. There's so many things going on. And what I loved highlighted in this story is just the fact that he says, hey, just be with me. Just be with me. And I think it's such a good reminder to just focus on being present, which is so hard, right? And when we do seek God first, we really do get his grace and his wisdom for whatever the problem is, whether your kids are really anxious, struggling, whether you're struggling, whether a loved one is struggling, he's going to give you the wisdom and the grace for this. But we have to be with him in order to get that wisdom. And we need to turn off everything else in the world and just come back to him. So let's get into some practical things, which I know you guys are all itching to hear. So I'm going to talk about kids first, and then we're going to talk about ourselves too. So one of my favorite activities, as we were talking about this gratitude stuff, is just keeping a gratitude journal or a gratitude jar. So depending on the age of the kids, if they can't write or don't understand that concept, either you could help them do that, or the gratitude jar is a really great option, and it could really be utilized in the family as well. So what you would do would be to, maybe you sit down at dinner or whatever time that your family's gathered, and you all just go around, what's one thing you're thankful for? And kids, they're hilarious, they're going to be like, I'm thankful for my dog, or like, I don't know, it's just weird random stuff, right? But write it down, because that's important. That's what they're thankful for, the littlest things or the biggest things. And then you can do it however you want, but maybe at the end of the week, you pull them out and you just acknowledge all the amazing things God has done for you and in your family that week. Or maybe you do it longer, however you want to do it. A calm corner or a box is a really awesome idea too. I actually almost like the box better because it can travel in the car, and I feel like the car is a place that a lot of kids get big feelings in. But what you would do is you'd put things that are tactile. So, I mean, fidgets are so popular, which makes it really easy to find them. But fidget toys, coloring, something soft, maybe something more heavy, just textured. You could put in headphones if you have like one of those Yodo music boxes or whatever, but things to do that would help them regulate their nervous system. So again, you want to think of how can we soothe down that amygdala so that we can be in that functioning prefrontal cortex still. So anything like that, you could put books in there. And then of course, just books about anxiety or feelings, I think are so important. And you do not need to like beat this down with your children. Like, we're gonna read all these books about all the feelings every day. That might be a little bit much, but just start adding some to your library at home, or get some from the actual library. But reading about just different emotions, talking about them, naming your own and modeling again in front of your kids is super helpful, as well as just drawing pictures. So I think for kids, like I said, they're not going to sit on the couch and tell you all of their big problems. But they are going to tell you, something's wrong. And so using art can be a really powerful tool. So maybe, let's just, for example, say your 6-year-old child is like having a big meltdown. After you've done the scene, the secure, I'm going to mix them up, scene, safe, secure, soothe, secure, the 4 steps to kind of connect with them emotionally. After you do that, then maybe you bring out some paper. Hey, I wonder how you felt before. Do you want to draw me a picture? Or maybe it's not even that direct. Maybe you just, hey, I wonder if you want to draw me a picture. Just totally open-ended and just see what comes out. I think it's going to be really powerful. You could use Play-Doh. Again, that's tactile, something that they can feel and squish and move. And then, of course, you could use toys, too. If you have a kid that's nervous to go to school, for example, and they're still in the play toys age, get out those Transformers, get out the race cars around that. I mean, you can play out different stories, and it's not just playing out what you want them to do, but maybe you're playing, those race cars, and maybe your car doesn't want to go to school, and you can, again, model and communicate, like, oh, I'm so scared. I don't want to go to school. My tummy's all upset. I'm getting a headache. You just are describing it, but through play, because there's a little distance when you use toys and objects in drawing versus talking so directly to them. That can feel really scary. So lots of different things. I always get the question, when to seek therapy, and that's just really hard to say all the time, but I always suggest if it's happening most of the time and for many weeks, it's probably time to get some kind of support professionally in coaching or therapy or whatever feels right for your family. But I'd say, if they're school age, for sure, talking to the teachers too and seeing how it's going at school. But usually for therapy, we look at how the functioning is. So are they functioning at home? Are they functioning well at school? Are they functioning in the environment? And if any of those are not functioning well, it could be worth talking to somebody. So what about us? Ironically, kind of similar. Again, I think practicing gratitude is super important, and it does not need to be like you carve out an hour of your day every day in your journaling, like we don't probably have time for that, but even just maybe you make it a ritual. Every morning you wake up and write 3 things down, 3 things I'm thankful for, or maybe at the end of the day, 3 things that you're really thankful that went well or not well or whatever happened in the day. And then sharing that with others too. I think either being in a community or having a good friend that you can just, hey, I just want to tell you what I'm thankful for today. I mean, it seems like a weird conversation. We don't typically talk about that. It's like, oh, I'm so busy at work. But getting in the habit of doing it is, again, going to just model it for the kids in your life. And then, of course, delegating tasks, easier said than done, I will say personally. But yeah, how can you take something off of your plate in the season you're in? If you're feeling overwhelmed, super anxious, stressed, what can you actually take off? And it's, of course you're going to be feeling maybe like, oh, I can't take anything off, but you can. And so maybe it's cleaning the house, maybe you outsource that, maybe you do a friend swap where they come over, help you clean your house, and then you go there and you clean your house and you get a, hangout date at the same time, or, Instacart is my favorite thing ever. Just figuring out how can you delegate some tasks so you're not so stressed out. And again, mindfulness and grounding techniques are huge. So just noticing your body. I love those body scan things. There's apps. There's like Calm app. There's like 100 apps out there now. But finding an app even is super helpful. And I know they have kid ones out there too, where you can just practice being in your body, just checking in with your breathing, meditation. All of that stuff is really good. Can be really hard to practice and like get into that habit. But once you do, you'll see the powerful effects of it. And then, of course, getting outside and moving your body. Super huge. It's becoming nice outside finally. That helps people get out more too. But just making sure that you are releasing some of that energy. I always think of this example too when I'm teaching others about anxiety is, those nature channel shows where it's like the lions chasing the antelope kind of a situation. What's so crazy and what, again, just so cool, because God totally designed everything, of course, and it's so apparent because, if that antelope gets away, first of all, it's probably not going to fight the lion, it's flight. So again, sympathetic, going back to our little graphic, it's going to run away from danger. The alarm system, amygdala is going off, beep, beep, beep. It runs. After it gets away, let's say the lion didn't get it, it does this crazy thing where it like shakes, like, I don't know, kind of just shakes all this energy off. And you could even see it in like, if you have a dog at home, sometimes it does this like weird random shake after it was nervous. That is literally the body getting rid of some of that anxiety out in the nervous system. And unfortunately, as humans and in our culture now, we don't do that because that'd be really weird, but we don't have a way always to get that out. And so what happens is we're just bottling this up, bottling it up. Then we explode, right? We flip our lid. We're so stressed out. That's all we talk about all the time. We need a way to get it out. And I think one of the easiest ways to do it is honestly exercise and just being out in nature, because it's going to regulate our body so much and let that anxiety come out. So that's just a side note of something I love to do is get outside and walk. All right, we made it. Questions and comments? Yay.
So much good information there. So if you've got a question, raise your hand, because there are people watching online and they need to be able to hear what your question is. But who wants to start us out today? Elisabeth. All right. All right, you're here. Look up.
So any other specific ways to approach a teenager with the anxiety that, because some of them, is a little bit more geared towards the younger kids, but kind of that teenage, almost adult kind of age?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, this talk was definitely more aimed towards younger children. I feel like the teenage world is a little different. I think whenever someone's really anxious, whether it's a teenager or an adult or whoever, the biggest key still is that emotional connection. And so how can you connect with a teenager who's maybe a little bit more moody, but also young kids are pretty moody, and so are adults, right? So figuring out how can you get in that back door a little bit to give them space so that you're not putting too much pressure on them sharing what's going on, but also, hey, I'm available. Hey, I'm right here if you want to talk, or I'm here if you want to hug. It's kind of tricky, and it's a balance, and it's probably different every day. But same idea. I mean, I think their brain is still developing too, and so if you can help them regulate their nervous system first, they're going to be able to use that prefrontal cortex so much easier to tell you. And they have more language than a young kid, of course. But I would just try to connect emotionally first without trying to come across as I'm just going to fix your problem, if that helps.
Really good. Those 4 S's that you use work with teenagers and husbands too. So, all right, you had a.
Actually, it's kind of redundant because it's a similar question, but when you literally gave they're flipping their lid, in a moment of panic and someone's panic attack, what could we do in that moment
Yeah.
to redirect them tangibly?
Yeah, that is so tricky. Of course, safety plays into that. So if they're panicking and like gonna hurt themselves in some way in their panic, that would be the number one way you'd want to first address the situation, just make sure they're safe. I think if they're flipping out, whether it's they just can't get that grasp, it comes back to being there physically, nervous system again, checking in with yourself, because if you see someone go in a panic, of course we care and our empathy is up, but we don't want to take that on and make ourselves have a panic attack of like, oh my gosh, I don't know what to do. You're freaking out, I'm freaking out, and now we've got 2 dysregulated nervous systems. And so as hard as it is, I would encourage to, oh my gosh, okay, she's having an issue. Okay, how am I feeling about this? I am noticing my heart's beating a little faster. Okay, take the few minutes, even if you can, to just calm yourself down so that you can think and make the best decision on how to help that teenager or child or whomever. Every situation is so different, but I would just say, if you can do that, then you'll have clarity of, yeah, maybe I need to sit closer to them and help them just breathe. I mean, panic attacks feel so real. They're not typically real physical events. They feel that way. They could lead to that way. But yeah.
Excellent. Going to come right here.
I was just going to add to that. I'm a medical social worker, so I deal with that a lot as far as tangible. One of the things is the breath is so important. So like times I've had even patients, it's like, look at me, look at me, look at me. And then they're following your breath just to calm them in that way. Temperature is huge. So I have raced to get ice cubes or ice packs and putting them literally in their hands for them, closing their hands, going from that. Usually you're more hot or sweating during those panic attacks, so taking that cold right away. Even temperature changes within. If it's super cold outside in the winter, I have walked people outside or, that kind of change. Or if you're outside, get into AC or things like that are just extremely helpful and tactful. And I do think essential oils work as well. Like that scent of something different can really be like, oh wow, I'm getting. And I think the most important thing to remember with panic attacks or anxiety attacks is they don't last forever. A typical panic attack is 10 minutes or less. So you will get through it, like you said, being there for them and getting through it. It's a real reaction that sometimes we can't even control. Anxiety attacks, we know why we're reacting that way. Panic attacks, we have no idea. Our body just reacted and not even knowing what to sometimes, but knowing that it doesn't last forever and that it'll pass in a few minutes. So.
Excellent tips. I haven't heard the ice one. That's actually a really good one. Yeah.
Love it. Love it. Somebody else? Yes, Marcy.
I have a question regarding, you mentioned the mirroring, which I think is a great concept. So if you have what I will call an anxiety that's been passed down through the family, and I'll give you an example. My mother was a real nervous driver, and her mother was. And therefore, when I learned to drive, I had to take my test 4 times, okay? So then I had 3 sons that I had to drive with when they were learning to drive. Well, now my son has 2 teenage daughters that are going to learn to drive, and he's like, I can't drive with them. So do you have any suggestions on that kind of thing that gets passed down and how you can interrupt it and stop it from happening?
That's a great question. I love that you brought that up. A couple thoughts that I had. One, we know anxiety is genetic. There is a genetic component to it for sure. So that's very real that we pass down some of those mental health things to our kids and grandkids. I was really recently in this training that I think would speak to this. It's probably not going to give you a just checkbox way to fix this problem. But I really encourage people who are noticing that pattern already to go to the family of origin work in therapy to figure out how they can heal some of their own wounds from their own parent style. Doesn't mean we're blaming them. Not your easy answer. I know you're looking at me like, oh, great. I mean more in the sense of if you're noticing that already with your own kids and now it's with the grandkids, it'll likely continue generation to generation until somebody breaks that cycle. And how do you break that cycle? Is you gotta heal some of those wounds from your own upbringing, because when you do that, then you've healed some of that and you're not passing down that same wound over and over and over again. Does that make sense? Not an easy answer, I'm sorry. Yeah. Yeah, I would say, I mean, honestly, some of it is even what we talked about today, helping him understand how to regulate himself. Because my guess would be that those girls are nervous because they sense him being nervous and anxious in that car. Even if he thinks he's not, he probably is. And so a lot of it's going to come to doing that own work on yourself. And if you don't know how to do that, that is what therapy can really help with, is helping you recognize that and learn those tools to regulate yourself. So
Yeah, Elizabeth, there's so much new therapy, right, that has to do with how do we go back, these defenders that we have and these protectors that we have that go way back to childhood and some of those formative things that until we get back there, right, and start working on that, it's really, really difficult. And so I have so many people who today are in their 50s, 60s, 70s that are going back to when they were 3 and 4 and 5 years old and unlearning some of those patterns. And it does take time, but those who will take the time to do that, it is an amazing gift. That to me is one of the greatest ways to break the generational stuff. All right, somebody else who's got a question? Right back here, yeah.
I actually have two. They're not related. So the first one is, could there be unknown anxiety in kiddos who have the trouble sleeping, have stomach aches, they don't know what it is? Like my son will wake up and he's like, I had a horrible night's sleep, and it's happening again and again and again. It's like, well, gosh, we didn't do any caffeine, we didn't do any sugar, we took all like the physical things out of it. You ran around to get the exercise and everything. What on earth could it be? Is the room too bright, too dark, yada, yada. Okay, second one is when there is a change coming up in a few, like a month or two, maybe 3 months down the road, and they are verbalizing, I'm kind of worried or I'm anxious about this new thing, this new soccer team I'm going to be on. What are some strategies to help stop that racing mind?
Okay, both really good questions. I'll start with that first one, and then you might, if I forget your second one, ask it again. I think if that's so normal that kids are not going to know what they're feeling. They're learning about emotions and learning about all those things. There are many different things that could be really related to not sleeping well and that kind of a thing. So, I always tell people, always check with your doctor first and just rule out any physical stuff or a sleep study stuff, and let's just make sure there's nothing physical. And if there's not, then I get a little bit more curious of like, I wonder if it's actually some anxiety or something going on. And they probably won't be able to verbalize that. But that's where you can just do some of that emotional intelligence teaching of like finding, there's so many books out there, it is hard to know which ones to get, but finding ways that you can kind of speak to maybe what you think it is through play or through those books and just see how they kind of react or respond to that information. And they might not respond at all, and you're like, oh, I think it definitely is that. And some of that is just growing with age and time, which is super frustrating because you're like, just sleep, please. But yeah, I would just kind of pay attention to it after you've ruled out anything physical that could be going on, because that's real too. There's so many things that affect sleep. It could be many things. So that's a good question. And then the anticipatory anxiety, I think, is a really great question and common. I always like to talk about what's coming, but not so much. And then it also then depends on the kid. Some kids do not do well being told so far in advance something is coming. And so kind of learning how your kid might respond. And so maybe you don't say, hey, we're going to start soccer in 3 months. Like maybe you wait until like a couple days before and say, hey, guess what? We start soccer on Thursday. And I got you, and just then go with it, because otherwise they just spin and spiral. But if they're a kid who really does want to know when things are coming and is still having a hard time, we can talk about it, and we just kind of say, hey, I'm always here to talk about those, but I wouldn't want them to always just be spinning. You have to be able to help them through that worry of whatever it is with soccer or whatever. And maybe it's just distracting too, of like, okay, we'll set a timer, we can talk about it for a few minutes, and then now we're gonna go outside and play and go do something active or something to kind of help them regulate again, and then say, we can talk about it tomorrow night or whenever. But yeah, I think it really depends on the kid, because some don't do well.
All right, we've got time for one more question if somebody has one. So last question, anybody? If not, I want to ask you about your podcast. So you got a podcast that has a lot of great episodes, and you've interviewed a lot of amazing people on there. So if somebody wanted to find your podcast, where do they go?
Well, anywhere you get podcasts.
All right, and the name of that is?
Experience Motherhood.
Experience Motherhood, and so you got to have some fun stories from doing this podcast. Like, if somebody wanted to, give me like your top 3 episodes. If somebody wanted to come into here, and it's really hard.
It is really
we won't let
hard.
any of your guests hear this part of it. All right, you can tell us who your favorite is, but give me something that would be a fun one for somebody to maybe start with.
Yeah, we've covered so many topics. I've been so blessed with any guest that comes on, and my favorite part just overall is that every person has that unique story, and I just love hearing that. So we've covered like every kind of topic you can think of, mostly in motherhood, because it's Experience Motherhood podcast, but anything from mental health stuff to just basic like recipes. I mean, we've just covered so many things. Recently, well, in the fall, it's not super recent, I guess, one of my favorite guests actually was Lindsay Baumgren, who was with Nourish, Move, Love, and if she was recently speaking at Wooddale too. But I think one thing that stuck out with me in that episode too is just that similar desires, that we all have these gifts and abilities, and it's just about figuring out how does God want to use them. And that can be really scary, and you have to be really patient sometime. And it just reminds me, I don't know, like even with our kids who might be anxious or whatever, it just kind of helps us, hey, God's got a story for them. He's going to use it. I don't know how, but he's going to, and he's going to use us as caregivers and parents in it too. So that was a really fun episode,
Awesome.
but I can't even pick anymore.
I know,
There's
that's
so
hard
many.
to do. That's an unfair question
We're
on
like
my
at
part.
70
Yes,
episodes, so I'm like, oh
Oh,
gosh,
that's
I gotta
great.
think back.
But Lindsay would be an amazing guest, and
wonderful.
and just so proud of both of you and what God's doing through you and Lindsay. But if you've got questions afterwards, Elisabeth said she'd be willing to stick around here for a little bit, so you are more than welcome to stick around and ask some questions. If you want information on that opportunity to bless one of our Eden Prairie schools, come see me afterwards as well. I'd love to talk to you about that, okay? Have a great week. Next week, Tiffany Bobbin-Dreyer, and she's going to be kind of dealing with trauma stuff in our life and how God can use that. All right? Thanks. Have a great week.
Yeah. I've got a resource page here if you want to pop it on for people too.